Hey folks, this is Ward 6 Council Member Charles Allen. I hope you are having a great time on the Southwest Home Tour. Thanks so much to Waterfront Village for helping put this together. It's really a great celebration of the amazing neighborhoods in Southwest. Such a great place to live, such a great place to for the village to help age in place. I want to thank the village for helping really work with our seniors to help make sure that they can have active living and age in place successfully in their community. Southwest is just a wonderful neighborhood with the river and all the amenities and parks and spaces. It's just great people in a great neighborhood. So thanks everybody. I hope you have a great time on the home tour.
Hi, I'm Tom Sherwood. Welcome to the Southwest Waterfront, a unique waterfront community. On 3 Sunday afternoons starting October 11th, you can join us for virtual tours of our homes and our houseboats. And then after the tours, join us on Zoom for interactive conversations. This is the 3rd year of the popular tour, but because of the virus, it's virtual. And because of that, the Waterfront Village is waiving any admissions fees. Of course, we'd still welcome any donations. To find out more about the tours and to register, please go to our website, waterfrontvillagehometour.org. That's waterfrontvillagehometour.org. We hope to see you soon, and welcome aboard.
Good afternoon and welcome to Waterfront Village's Homes of the Southwest Waterfront, a virtual tour through one of the most exciting neighborhoods in DC, Southwest. My name is Len Bechtel. I'm the Executive Director of the Waterfront Village, and I'm so glad you're sharing your afternoon with us for today's show. And what a show it is! A celebration of Southwest. You will get to see our architecture, meet our people, and experience that special spirit that makes Southwest one of the friendliest and most diverse parts of the city. And best of all, you'll get to support a great cause. The Waterfront Village is a nonprofit organization that serves older adults in the Southwest and Navy Yard neighborhood. We do this by providing a wide range of home and health services, referrals, advocacy, and a fun and enriching social calendar. Today's show is the second of a 3-part series. In each episode, we feature 4 homes, 12 homes in all, including townhomes, apartments, and houseboats. I'm sure you'll enjoy meeting our owners, and you'll get a chance to ask them questions at the conclusion of their segment. With that, let's move to the show in just a minute. First, I'd like to remind you that although your ticket to today's show is free, we are asking you to consider making a donation to Waterfront Village. You can do that at our website, waterfrontvillagehometour, all one word, .org. That's waterfrontvillagehometour.org. With that, I'd like to introduce our board president, Ann Martin, who will serve as your host for today's show. Enjoy the show!
I'm Ann Martin, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to episode 2 of the Waterfront Village 2020 Home Tour. We've had 2 previous traditional home tours, but of course, due to COVID, we've adapted, but we think you'll enjoy this program. You've met Len Bechtel, the Executive Director of our DC Waterfront Village, and of course, a Southwest resident. I'll be introducing you to the owners of 3 of the homes that we'll visit today. Immediately after each home visit, we'll spend a few minutes with Andy Piers for quick questions about the home we've just toured. Now, you'll need to use your chat function on the Zoom application to send your question to Andy. After our 4th home visit, we'll view a short documentary describing the history of that section of Southwest and have an opportunity to chat with the author of the documentary. Then I'll be back to share with you the neighbors who made these 3 weeks possible, and also to give you an update on episode 3 that you won't want to miss. And now, come with me and enjoy your visit to the Southwest neighborhood of Washington. Today, we're returning to Harbor Square Cooperative. You may recall from last week that Harbor Square is on the National Register of Historic Places. Its 440 units range from efficiencies to 3-bedroom homes. At the time it was developed in 1966, it was praised as a benchmark for good design and a model for new urban renewal. A unique and perhaps overlooked feature was the incorporation of several homes from earlier centuries into this, the ultimate in modern design. These homes include the Federal-style brick house built in 1817, known as the Lewis House, which was named for Mr. Edward Lewis, who was a clerk in the Navy Department, and also the 4 attached 3-story brick houses built in 1794, named Wheat Road. These 4 houses took their name from an 1819 owner named John Wheat, who was a gardener and also a Senate messenger. We won't see it on this year's tour, but directly across from Harbor Square is the Thomas Law House, which was built between 1794 and 1796. Mr. Law was a wealthy English aristocrat who married the eldest granddaughter of Martha Washington, Miss Eliza Parke Custis. They occupied the Law House for a period of time, and it earned the nickname Honeymoon House. But we'll save that for another time. Right now, we're going to step back into the current era and say hello to Catherine and Hans. We're here.
When we saw the place, it was the original floor plan. They had a coat closet blocking the windows when you come in the front door, and the coat closet wall extended to be the kitchen wall, blocking the entire windows from the kitchen and from the foyer. And we decided we wanted to knock out that wall. And given that the dining room was bigger than we would need, it would seat perhaps 20 as a sit-down dinner, which I never would ever hold. We decided to reduce the size of the dining room, recapture some utility space at the other end of the kitchen in order to put in a washer dryer, which the unit didn't have. So we made it as open to the light and we made a great room effect, which was not the original intent. The original floor plan was more the 1960s, close the kitchen off from the living room. So that was the idea, was to gain as much light and openness as we could manage. But I didn't enlarge the kitchen. It's really the same general size as the original. No need for a large one. It was just to move it out and make it more open to the windows. It feels when I'm working in there as if I'm really participating in the light entirely, and it makes it so that you almost don't need as much artificial light as you might otherwise. So it's more pleasant to work in for sure. We were married in 1971 and started accumulating furniture. Much of it, the wood is Scandinavian. As you remember, isn't it good? Norwegian wood. We were very into it for a good while. And when we moved here, part of the attraction was that the architecture met the style of our history, I suppose. And so we moved in a good bit of the furniture that we had from our townhouse and married it together in different ways. But yes, we enjoy the openness of it and the fact that it feels as if it's harmonious with the style of the unit. And it's partly what we were looking for. Well, it was the light. It was simply the south-facing windows in this magnificent open living and dining room. And I wanted to make maximum use of that when making some alterations, but that was the primary thing that attracted us. And the room sizes are large that you couldn't find. We looked at other apartments in Northern Virginia and in the Northwest, and all the new construction was very tight, and buildings were close together. This has views outside that would never be built now. Now they build another building very close. So this is the one thing that's very attractive about Harbor Square is its age means it was built where we had almost a park-like setting. We do have a beautiful open winter view, of course, because all these big trees are deciduous, and we can look down the river to the Haynes Point, and we can see the Washington Monument in the other direction. So we do feel as if the winter, and then of course these trees do turn beautiful colors in the fall as well. So yes, it makes for a delightful seasonal view. We had a place in Florida for a while and decided this was where we really wanted to be. And part of it is the change in season. So we find this apartment really gives us what we needed. The water garden is really a magnificent feature. There has been controversy as to whether we should encourage wildlife in it, ducks and so forth. So there's been a good bit of hoopla in the community about how exactly it should be used. But the design it's beautiful at night as well when the lights are on all around, and you really feel as if you are in a resort almost. Someone else has commented it reminds them of the Caribbean or something of that sort. So it's delightful to look at. Really a very pleasant way to keep the feeling of what can I say, design harmony. I guess in the 60s, 1965 was when this place was completed, there was a sense that cooking was work, and it was to be done in a hidden kind of fashion. It's a messy bit of work. And now I think people look at it as performance art in a way. If you have guests, they help you, they participate, or they admire how you're doing it. And so there's a little more openness in that sense. And I suppose that part of it is men have taken an interest in cooking. So it makes it so that it's much more a convivial activity as it was not in the past. I almost had a sense from the way they designed it earlier that they were trying to appeal to people who might have a maid or a cook coming and going in the back entrance and preparing things out of sight of the host and hostess who were here entertaining their guests. So it was a different feeling, and I think partly that was why the foyer was so closed off too. But maybe it was a sense of drama also. Instead of wow to begin with as soon as you came in the door, it was more of your guests came to the foyer, divested of their coats, and then were ushered in for the great reveal. So it's a different sense. Maybe made it feel as if the place were bigger to take the place. Maybe trying to appeal to people who had houses elsewhere and wanted to have the feeling of home, of a single-family home. It is impressive because I think the designer really did a wonderful job making the space feel as if there's lots of space and as if you can just move into it. This architect seemed to know what she was doing. I believe it was Clotilde Smith who designed it, and it's an intentional use of the space. And even though we've made some alterations, I think in general we've kept to the original design and the original sense, the original atmosphere of the apartment. And it's to the credit of the designer that it stood the test of time.
It's the lighting that's in your home, and wondered, is that a lighting designer that helped you with that, or is that the overall designer that helped, or was that just came from your imagination?
I assume they mean the installed lighting, or
Yeah.
that really was the architect who designed our renovation. Savannah Bunky did a beautiful job, and so she put in most of the lighting, and I did select the fixtures, but it was her plan.
Savannah Bunky, also Harbor Square resident.
Harbor Square owner. She's in the stack here, so she knows all about how to do what's behind these walls.
And who was on the home tour last year, thanks to you. I don't know if everybody knows, but you were a board member that served so kindly during that. So thank you for all of that. That's about, well, we have more, but we have to kick it back to Anne for the next one. Thank you so much. Your place is lovely.
Certainly.
Okay, thank you, Catherine and Andy. We're now walking just a few hundred yards or so to the Wharf Gangplank Marina. Built in 1977, Gangplank is one of the largest liveaboard communities in the country with 88 slips. The docks were newly rebuilt in 2019. But as we're walking toward the marina, we want to look to the left toward the end of the Washington Channel Promenade. There we see the stately Titanic Memorial. The Women's Titanic Memorial Association sponsored a competition that was restricted to female artists to commemorate the 1,517 victims of the Titanic sinking on April 15, 1912. The 15-foot red granite statue, which stands on a wide granite pedestal, was unveiled in 1931 after a significant fundraising effort. The inscription reads, "To the brave men who perished in the wreck of the Titanic, April 15, 1912, they gave their lives that women and children might be saved." The sculptor of this lovely monument was Gertrude Vanderbilt Whitney, who later founded the Whitney Museum of American Art in New York City. And the pedestal was designed by Henry Bacon, who is the architect of the Lincoln Memorial. Every year on April 15th, after the midnight hour, you can walk to the statue and witness the special ceremony by the Men's Titanic Society as they each toast, quote, "the brave men who gave their lives," unquote, and they lay a beautiful wreath there. Now, if you hear a duck quack, it's because we've now arrived here at the marina. It was reported that when John Quincy Adams was in the White House, he liked to take a swim in this Washington Channel. But we won't be swimming, but we'll be visiting on the Tenalock, a 45-foot ketch sailboat where we'll meet Aubrey, Greg, and Little Rue. Permission to come aboard.
When we first started looking at boats, we looked at some barges, we looked at a big old tugboat that's over here too, and we wanted something that we could take out ourselves and potentially go if we wanted to just go. That's why sailboat, probably more specifically than anything else.
And the lifestyle it's a duality. We had jobs on land, but we were able to have access to this amazing lifestyle of boating and having great neighbors and this adventure while still maintaining a living at home. And that was something that was appealing.
Yeah, and also to live in DC in this much space, a condo would cost $600,000 or more, you know? So this was a better opportunity for us to have a full-time place to live with a slip and be happy.
Rue, do you like living on a boat? She talks about the generator. We talk about the weather all the time because she hears the rain on the roof.
Yeah, so she, like, if it's windy, like we were in the middle of a tropical storm and we were at a T-head just rolled over top of it, and I'm getting ready to go outside because we've lost a boom cover. And her response is, "Hey, Daddy, it's windy." I'm like, "Yeah, it's windy, all right. Thanks for letting me know. I don't know if you noticed, we're sideways right now." But I mean, that kind of stuff, like she mentions, but also she started walking really early, and like she can climb this ladder. So I think her mobile ability has been a little more advanced because of that. Because she gestated on this boat. So I think for her it's normal though. Because everyone's like, "Well, how'd she handle when you were out in the bay for 5 months?" And we're like, it was the same thing. Her home was just moving, and it's still home. It's all she knows. So before we went out, I put up new lifeline the whole way around the boat. So there's lifeline, but there's also a lifeline netting. And normally if a boat has netting like that, it means they have kids or dogs. Generally speaking, if you see a boat with that, they've got kids or dogs. That's just a truth. So that's up for her. She doesn't do any outside cockpit walking unless we are at anchor and one of us is with her. That's a rule. She knows she can't get out of the cockpit unless she has permission to. And if she's outside, she always has a life vest on if we're underway.
I mean, we're extra vigilant because when we walk on docks, you know, we're surrounded by water, and we just reinforce rules and holding hands, and it's exhausting, but it's worth it.
She's also been doing swim lessons since she was 6 months old because we were like, you know, probably a great idea.
And she refers to water as pool. So she'll say, "Oh, my boat." When we had the boat hauled out, she goes, "Oh, my home's out of the pool."
Yeah. Our neighbor lives on a river that we stayed at for a little while during that. It was Rah Rah's pool. And now whenever it's a body of water, oh, you put my dinghy back in Rah Rah big pool?
Look, my
I'm like, yeah,
dinghy's in
it's
the
called the
pool.
Bay.
Yeah.
Rah Rah's got some clout, man.
Well, once you come into the boat, you know, we don't want to rush through the foyer, which is when you just immediately stand in the foyer. We like to identify every location of this square footage that we use. I mean, you turn immediately to your left. We've got our fridge. It's built into the countertop. So you've got a full countertop there. You just lift it up and your fridge goes all the way down. We have a 3-stove oven that's propane, so we have access to cooking all the time. We've got a double sink. So, and then we've got cabinets that are all stocked up with provisions from us when we went out, and we got our spice rack
on the
magnetic
ceiling, so we've saved space. Now that we've gone underway for a significant amount of time, it's a little bit different perspective too of how much we can hold on the boat, how long we can be out for at anchor and not even go to a dock, things like that.
And we lived on the boat for 4 years, so our 4-year anniversary was in July. And we were out on the boat together for 5 months, where you're out at anchor. No one's leaving to go to work. No one's leaving to take out the trash until we're all getting in the dinghy and all going over. So in a way, I feel like we actually learned as a family of 3 how to live on this boat. Oh, while we were out, we keeled over hard. We weren't ready. A lot of stuff fell, and on our kitchen counter we have our container of spatulas and everything, and there were this pair of tongs. We cannot to this day find that pair of tongs. It did not fall out of the boat. It did not fall into something. I don't know where it went. I don't know, but we can't find that anywhere. It's amazing how you can still lose stuff.
It's really kind of about space optimization. Like the cockpit, great place to hang out, great place to have a drink. It's got a table that folds up and down. We actually have a projector and a projector screen. We hang on the mizzen mast and we project it from the top of the helm, and we sit on the sides and watch it from the 2 couches upstairs. So that's a good use of space. I mean, pretty much everything has to be dual purpose that we bring onto the boat. So if something like we have one pan, and most pans, you know, are pretty specific. This is a cast iron flat pan. We use it for quesadillas primarily, and its second function is for now naan and or weapon. So that's how we justify, you know, why do we need 5 cast iron pans if we're living on a sailboat? Like, it's stuff like that, where unless it's got dual purpose or a very important single purpose, it shouldn't be on the boat.
I think living on a sailboat in DC feels like you have a country home and a city home. You have access to the city, and if you immediately want to get away and have a water view, you can take your boat out, or even just being at home.
But yeah, so I mean, it is lovely to be on the boat in DC, and it's just a different way of living from a community lifestyle too. Like, we lived in DC for years. We probably talked to our only neighbor once or twice, right? You know your landlord who lives above you. But other than that, you're not talking to your neighbors. Here you know every single one of your neighbors. And if something were to happen, they would hop on your boat and help save it. If, you know, like, people pitch in. It's really nice to have a good community.
Greg, Aubrey, that was awesome. Can you hear me okay?
I think so.
Yes, can you hear us?
Hey, hi, we can hear you perfectly. Hi, Rue. How you doing? Hi, can you wave to me? Yes, hello. She smiled. How's it going?
Be a little shy.
Yeah. How old?
She's 2.5.
2.5. Fun. Well, a lot of questions are about Rue, actually. This might not surprise you. I'll start with an easy one about the boat, though. Somebody is curious to know the livable square footage of that boat, if you're able to calculate it.
If you don't include the cockpit, inside's about 300 square feet.
300. Okay.
Yeah.
So with
but
that
the thing to
creative
remember-
story, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, the thing, the storage in boats is built the way it's supposed to be built. So there's a lot of space in that 300 square feet. It's pretty advantageous. People have been sailing boats for hundreds of years, so they figured out how to utilize space for sure.
They figured it out. Okay. Well, now to Rue. Her toys. As she gets bigger, her toys will get bigger. What's the plan there? Or does the boat become the toy?
We for a while we're doing kind of a 1-in 1-out policy, which doesn't really work. So we kind of rotate toys. She's only got so much space in there. Her room, by the way, in that video looks atrocious. It's much cleaner than that normally. It was a last minute thing. She was playing in there and we kind of just shoved everything back in. But we kind of rotate her toys. We kind of figure things out as she stops using them.
Right.
So,
are there other kids out there on the marina where you could do a toy swap so you don't have to?
Yeah, there are. There are a couple of boys and a younger girl and another little boy, and so there are some other kids. And sometimes our kitchen, supplies just end up being her toys, which is very similar to I think a lot of parents with toddlers.
Yep.
So
Same
it's not
same
that
here.
different. But yeah, you do have to pick and choose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same here. At what point will she be able to help you sail? Do you think?
I hope sooner than later. I don't know about sailing so much as like scrubbing stuff and maybe sanding some wood would probably be the first move. I got the netting around. She doesn't really leave the cockpit when we sail, but hopefully like 6, 7, she'll be useful maybe.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
For sailing, more useful for sailing.
For sailing, right? I mean, I find it difficult with a child to do anything without having to, monitor the child. You're out trying to sail or sailing.
Yeah.
I can't even imagine the complications that could arise there.
We had one of those little booster chairs with a built-in food tray on it for a while, and we would just put that in the cockpit, and we actually had that harnessed in place so she could play in the cockpit, and we could still be outside of us when we were sailing, and she's secure and can't go anywhere. So she'd be in her bolted-in chair with a life vest on in the chair and just sitting there totally content. So you make it work.
That's awesome. Whose idea was a spice rack on the ceiling?
I think that was me. We got that at her old apartment, and I wasn't sure what we were gonna do with it, but I didn't want to get rid of it. I was like, we're putting it on the ceiling, because it needed to be out of the way, and I was tired of looking at it where it was. So
that makes sense. And this is a very important question. Have the tongs been found?
No, we gave up. We bought new tongs.
Then you'll find them tomorrow or later today.
We did lose it. We lost a spatula actually during one of the home boat tours last year, I believe. So around that time, and we found it when we were sailing a year later. It was just jammed. It had fallen down in between two cabinets. It was like pretty much, it should have been in the bilge essentially. So yeah, it'll pop up soon now that we bought a new one.
Of course. Well, thank you so much. That was such a cool trip through your boating life there. Thank you. Really appreciate it. And we'll go ahead and head back to Ann, but thank you so much.
Thanks for everything.
Okay.
Hi, Rue.
Thank you, Andy and Aubrey and Greg. Rue. Our next visit will be to Tiber Island development. Tiber Island was actually a man-made island formed when the Washington City Canal was dug to connect the Tiber Creek and the James Creek, thus creating an island. The canals were later filled in and the island was once again part of the District of Columbia. The Tiber Island complex was an early part of the Southwest redevelopment plan. Completed in 1965, it was considered a model for the rest of the country and was an early example of condominiums. In 1966, the complex received an American Institute of Architects Honor Award, and Fortune magazine included Tiber Island on its list of the 10 best buildings in the United States. The 64 brick and concrete townhouses, which form Tiber Island condominium, differs from the Tiber Island Cooperative, which features high rises and a central plaza. Hard to fathom now, but underground parking was an innovation when Tiber Island was designed and built. Both Tiber Island Condominium and Tiber Island Cooperative Homes are on the Register of Historic Places. And now we'll stop in to see Sharon and Bruce.
Well, what sparked my interest was that I had a new job down here at Lafayette Plaza, Constitution Plaza actually, and the commute was way too long. I mean, we were coming from Potomac and it's just not that far, but the traffic was horrific. I actually liked the fact that work had not been done on it because I want to have my imprint on my house, and so particularly with regard to bathrooms and the kitchen. The kitchen had been renovated, I'd have to say more than 10 years ago. I think it was an IKEA kitchen, the owner did himself. My favorite place in the house is the kitchen. I just love how it's situated. I love the fixtures. I love the tile. I just love it. I'll go down and sit in the chair on one of the stools and just look at it. The house is originally 4 bedrooms. There are 2 on the 3rd floor, and there were 2 on the 4th floor as well. But when we bought it, the owners had already knocked the wall down, and so it became one big suite, which we actually liked. And so the second room we divided into 3 parts: the sitting area, a walk-in closet, and the other third went to the bathroom to expand it because it was really small. I love fireplaces, so we have a fireplace here in the living room, in our bedroom, and the flame effect, I think, is beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, traditionally in the Tiber Island units, the upper floor would get like really cold or really hot. But it turns out that putting the fireplace up there too actually adds to the heat when you need the heat. We can go like an entire day and not see
without seeing each other.
I mean, literally from like 9 until 4. There's a lot of times where Sharon will come down the stairs, I'll realize that I hadn't seen her all day.
Yeah.
You know, maybe passing down to the kitchen. But, you know, it's a big enough place that there's places you can sort of
have your own space. I mean, that was really important to me. This is almost 3,000 square feet, but it's the separation of the floors and the separation of the individual spaces was really important. This is my sanctuary. I work an awful lot of hours. I mean, obviously, I've been on mandatory telework since the middle of March, and I'm still working an awful lot of hours, plus some. And I love the peace and the quiet. The windows are great because you don't hear. You're in the middle of the city and you don't hear any noise, right? But a lot of stuff could be going on outside, and you can look outside but still be quiet and peaceful. And so when I come home from work, I just want to be here in an environment, in a space that I love. I absolutely loved the openness of it. I loved the stairs, the fact that you can see through. I loved the fact that even though we didn't have an elevator at the time, that it was 4 floors. Even though people thought, are you crazy? You're going to be in your 60s and you want 4 floors. But we knew that we would have to put in an elevator because to age in place, you wouldn't be able to do 4 floors, not for very long. You have to know which direction the floor joists run in, because an elevator through the roof and the floors is a structural change. It's a structural modification, and so you're affecting the structural integrity of the house. And so it's actually not that complicated a process for people who know what they're doing. But we had an engineer come and give us some load-bearing information and whether we could actually cut the joists and how to shore up the joists and all that. I knew that this is the only place in the house where the elevator could go, all 4 floors, without it being an imposition in the flow. It doesn't affect the flow of the house at all. In fact, you walk in and you don't see it. Right? The only place that it's really visible is in our bedroom on the 4th floor, and it's sort of an architectural feature. It's interesting, and I really wanted something that was consistent with the openness, and so not a box elevator, but something that you could actually see through. It can accommodate both of us. I think it takes up to 450 pounds. I think it's a pretty strong elevator. It's structural. It's a vacuum. It's a pneumatic vacuum elevator, so it doesn't require a machine
Cables
room
or anything like that.
We love to travel. I mean, that's what we do. And so many of the artifacts in the house are from places we've been. The things are very special to us. Everything just sort of reminds us of a particular place that we've been.
We had a Yorkie who came with us from Maryland, and he I mean, for like this little dog, he would like go up and down 4 flights of stairs.
Yeah, easily 15 times a
15
day. He just
times a
run.
day. He like totally was into it. So he lived to be 17. And he passed away this
March 31st.
Yeah, so we've got a little memorial over there to him. But
yes, the top of the middle shelf is.
But you know, to me, like when I think of the house, I think of him too, which is
yeah, he loved it. We hope we're in it for a long, long time. I mean, I really hope that we can live to enjoy it for many more years. And that, you know, our kids, I mean, obviously it will pass to them when we go, but hopefully they will find joy whatever they do. I mean, they might sell it, in which event there is no joy living here, but there may be joy getting the proceeds from it. But it's given us a lot of good memories and vibes and
Bruce, Sharon, are you two there?
We are here. Yes, hang on. We're doing the video.
Yep.
Hey, good to see you again. How are you?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good. Good. What a cool space. I mean, the elevator is amazing. We have a lot of questions about that. Of course we do. But why don't we get to that in a moment? I do have we have a few other questions about did we actually see that? Yeah, the glass enclosed office of Bruce's. Sharon, does that work for you?
That was my idea. He speaks an awful lot on the phone. He generally works from home, and I wanted to put him over there, but I didn't want to block the light coming in, because light comes in from every aspect of the home, and we wanted to keep it that way. Yes, it works perfectly fine for me.
And it also protects me and insulates me from everybody else who comes through. So
right, good thinking. And Bruce, you're not blocking the light, so you could stay. It sounds like a really well thought out house in general, especially that. So it works for you. That's good. I'm going to get right to the elevator. Well, one more question. The kitchen floor. Somebody asked about the kitchen floor. Is that what material?
It's tile.
It's just tile. Just
it looks like wood, but it's tile.
Got it. All right. Somebody had some very interesting questions there. So anyway, the elevator is really cool. How long did it take from the time they started the work to completion? I know there was a planning timing prior to, but as far as the work, how long?
Well, the entire process started in September and ended in March, but that was with about 2 months of absolutely no work being done because of the permitting process and the back and forth between that office and the elevator contractor. So all told, it probably could have been done within a month, but it lasted that much longer.
Got it. Okay. And thinking, will this ever get done? Or is it more a DCRA thing than a vendor thing? Okay. All right. And somebody asked what brand is the elevator?
So the company we used was Signature Elevator, which is out in Rockville. But the actual elevator is made by a company in, I believe, Miami or just outside of Miami.
It is called, the company is Pneumatic Vacuum Elevator, PVE.
Got it. Okay. I'm copy that down. I'm sure we're going to get some more questions about that. Does it accommodate a wheelchair?
Not this particular size. This is 37 inches in diameter. There's another one that is 30 that really accommodates just one person. And then there is a 52-inch that can accommodate a wheelchair.
Got it. Okay, that's good to
This
know.
one is enough room for both of us standing.
Okay. All right. Do you ever take it just for fun? I mean, what's been the use like since you put it in?
Well, so today, just as an example, we went to the supermarket, and we have a little refrigerator on the 4th floor. So we were bringing in some waters, and we just kind of load up the elevator for it. So we use it for moving heavier stuff. And then also when we travel, sort of packing our suitcase on the 4th floor and bringing it down to the bottom so we can easily get out to street level.
That's
great. The purpose of it, the primary purpose of it is so that we can age in place. I mean, we didn't frivolously put it in. And so I've had a real bad back problem for months. It's actually getting better, thank God, but the elevator has been extraordinarily helpful, and Bruce had some issues as well. So it's really come in very handy.
Yeah, that's incredible. It doesn't necessarily need to transport you, but your belongings would alleviate a lot of those issues going up and down. I do have more questions about that, but let's leave that alone for a second. You have 2 fireplaces, I think I saw there.
We have 3.
Right? 3.
We have 3, and they're electric. I love fireplaces, and I know I use the word love an awful lot in the dialogue, and Bruce is like, well, you have a lot of love for things. Actually,
happy about that.
It is not an exaggeration to say I certainly love living here, and I certainly had a lot of joy renovating this place to my style, and Bruce helped.
Right, sure. So that's it gets back to how they're fueled. So they're all electric.
They're all electric, yes, and they do generate a significant amount of heat.
Okay.
Which I tend to get very cold, and the top floors, I think Bruce said in the presentation, generally gets very cold in the winter.
Okay. All right. And last question. You've mentioned doing a lot of work at the house. What's next?
In terms of renovating the house, it's absolutely done. We're finished.
It's done.
That's it. Right. It took us 3 years. We started we moved here in 2013. We started planning in 2014. We did it in phases, and we finished in July of 2017. And that's with the exception of the elevator, which we finished earlier this year.
Yeah.
That's it. Oh.
Yeah. Nothing significant more is going to happen anytime soon, Andy.
Sure. That's what you say today.
There's nothing left to be done. We did the patios, the back and
I did have a question about the patio. Somebody wanted to know if the construction noise presents any kind of problem on your 6th Street side.
Not really. No.
I mean, we definitely don't hear it inside. And if we're sitting on the patio, either we've become immune to it, or it just doesn't turn into much of an intrusion. So no.
Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for sharing your space. It was a joy to walk through, and I'm so glad that you all used the elevator and got in the elevator and had Bruce go ahead and film that. That was fun. But thank you so much. We really enjoyed it.
Our pleasure.
Yep.
Thanks. Back to Ann.
Okay. Thank you, Andy and Sharon and Bruce. We're going to move now from the ultra-modern and elevators and townhouses to step back into the 1800s for a moment before we visit our next home. In 1871, the district's first Board of Health began to condemn dwellings that had sprung up after the Civil War and were considered unfit for habitation. They were often without adequate water or sewer facilities. In 1904, the Washington Sanitary Housing Company was formed to build and rent what was called sanitary and affordable housing. From 1907 to 1914, the WSHC developed duplex houses on a number of streets in Southwest. One of these homes is where our next visit will begin. In conjunction with this visit, we have the pleasure of viewing a documentary detailing the sanitary housing initiative. You'll meet Dr. Marjorie Lightman, a Southwest resident and historian. Along with her business partner, Dr. William Zisel, she has curated an exhibition on Washington in the 1960s and 70s for the Smithsonian Community Museum in Anacostia, published a history of the University of the District of Columbia, and an historical context study of the Southwest. Currently, they're working on a new book about the Southwest-Southeast waterfront. After our house tour, we'll see the documentary, and then Andy will spend a few minutes with Dr. Lightman. As always, if you have questions, use the chat function to forward them to Andy. And after that, I'll be back to tell you about the folks who made this program possible and also to give you a preview of next week's program. Let's go back to the 1800s and step into a sanitary house.
I've lived in Southwest since 2002, and during most of the time that I lived near Potomac Place Tower, I knew about Old Southwest a little bit, but didn't really drive along Carrollsburg Place or Half Street. And one day I ended up on this street because I went to a Nationals game. And then I looked and noticed that there were row houses here, and I had known that in Southwest there were these types of row houses here. So I was intrigued, and I knew exactly where I wanted to move, which was Old Southwest, because I wanted to stay in the neighborhood, and I wanted to be in a row house that looked like it was here for a while, not necessarily a row house from the 1960s. So most of the row houses in Old Southwest were built around 1909, I believe, and they were built as sanitary housing back in the day for working class people. So they were originally built as duplexes where one floor had a one-bedroom apartment, and then the second floor also had a one-bedroom apartment with entrances to each that were separate. So when I finally decided that I wanted to move and started looking at homes to buy, I knew I wanted to be in Old Southwest. And when I first walked into this house, it looked like it needed a lot of work. It was already divided into, or it was already converted into a single family home, but the kitchen was very outdated. If you lifted up the countertops, you could practically lift the countertops without any effort. The cabinets, they had peeling paint. I noticed that there was a brick wall, there was an exposed brick wall that was original to the house, and then a large fireplace. So those were the first two things that I noticed when walking into the house. Everything else I knew could be fixed at some point, but those details were unique for the home, and I wanted to be in that type of place that had some history to it. I knew that everything else in the house could be remodeled, and it needed to be remodeled, but those little details that I saw that were original to the house, I wanted to keep. So that's how I decided that this was the place that I was going to spend the next few years.
Beginning in the 1890s, there is a social reform movement going on. Remember, there's a huge influx of immigrants coming in from Eastern and Southern Europe, the Ellis Island migrations in the Northeast, all the way through Chicago. And there are places like Hull House, right? And the Henry Street settlement. There's a whole reform movement going on. Here in Washington, there isn't a large influx of immigrants from the Ellis Island group. That stops just about Baltimore. However, there's a large migration in over the past 50 years from the end of the Civil War of African Americans coming up from the South. And Washington is an easy city to get to, and it has a whole culture in the African American community. Long before the Civil War, when this was a slave city, it had didn't fit the profile of the southern cities. It had the largest free black population and an educated black population, which had an infrastructure of educational institutions and charities and churches. So it was a place that that African Americans from further south who were looking for opportunity came. And they came up the Potomac. The railroads tied into Norfolk. Norfolk was the great port, intracontinental port. And all the railroads tied to Norfolk. And at Norfolk, they picked up steamers, which came right up the Potomac and stopped at 7th Street, at the pier, at the waterfront. And that's where they disembarked. And they left there, and at the waterfront were trolleys. And they had a few cents, and they had the name of someone who knew a family member or who had a connection to someone who somebody knew. And they took the trolley and very often wound up at a boarding house here in the Southwest as the first step to a better life. Okay? However, this was the poorest part of the city. And white Washingtonians were very proud because there was much to do about the slums of the Lower East Side and the slums of Chicago. There were no slums in Washington. White Washingtonians were proud of their city. In 1905, Jacob Riis, who's the great reformer from New York, came down and gave a speech to white Washingtonians. And he told them he had counted 298 alleys where the poor were living. And poor in Washington meant African American poor. And they were living in conditions far worse than those of the Lower East Side in London, East End London, which were the slums of the times. Now, alleys are characteristic of southern cities. They're not bad. That's where deliveries are made. That's where horses are stabled. They are built with houses that face the front, that are substantial houses, and form a perimeter with alleys leading to the inner part. And there are stables there, and there is also housing that's cheap. Poorly constructed housing. It used to be slave housing when the city was a slave city, and it became poor African American, the poorest of the poor. And there were not only 298 in the city, they were concentrated in the Southwest. Southwest had more alleys, noxious alleys, than anywhere else in the city. Now, the people who, like Jacob Riis, had many kinds of reform proposals for what to do with these alleys. And reform is a new issue. Nobody cared about these poor people before, but it was so obvious that the cities were choking from the influxes that people began to care. And among those were called the sanitarians. The sanitarians were a group of the late 19th and early 20th century who argued that social behavior was in part determined by the kinds of conditions people lived in. That if they had good air, cross ventilation, sanitation, healthy food, they would be the kind of citizens you want in the city. And they were called the sanitarians, and thus the sanitary housing. Now, the sanitary housing is the first urban renewal in Washington. It was all the sanitary housing was built to replace terrible alleys. And they were done on a principle that Republicans would love. It was a free enterprise principle. This was a social reform movement that argued there was no conflict between capitalism and quality of social reform. And what they formed was the Washington Sanitary Housing Company. And this company agreed that it would build housing for the poor. But instead of developers making 20 to 25% on their returns, which was common in new housing, they would restrict their returns to between 3 and 6%. And the difference between the return, between modifying the return and the cost of building, was to reduce the rent so the working class could afford the houses. And that's what this was the third effort by the Washington Sanitary Housing Company at urban renewal in Washington. In some 1,500 apartments were built in the Southwest over a period of 25 years. And these were the earliest in the Southwest, but they weren't just on Carrollsburg and Half Street. They were also built where the park is now, where the duck pond is. There was a notorious alley there, and it was cleared out, and they built sanitary housing. Remember the sanitary homes and the James Creek housing. Sanitary housing is directly across the street from the James Creek housing. The James Creek housing was built in 1941-42 by the Alley Dwelling Authority, which also cleared out and built. And it was immediately taken over by the Navy to house African-American work people at the Navy, because the Navy was was on war footing on a 24/7 schedule, and African-American housing for workers in Washington was desperate. It was desperate for everyone for housing in Washington during the war. But because it was a segregated city, it was even more desperate for African-American workers. But workers were desperately needed during the war years. And so the Navy took over the James Creek houses and turned them into working houses. After the war, the James Creek houses remain working class housing. In 1957, the buildings built by the Washington Sanitary Housing Authority, Housing Company, and by the Alley Dwelling Authority, which were the James Creek houses, were all less than 40 years old. And they were a solid core of middle-class housing that was largely African American, and there was no reason to raise them. So that whole area was excluded from the plans to raise the Southwest. So from 3rd Street, from Delaware Avenue and 3rd Street, all the way down to Half Street was not raised. Cyphex and Greenleaf were built in the early 60s. Okay? They aren't nearly as successful as housing as either the sanitary housing or James Creek. James Creek had a large HUD renewal grant in '78 and has been stable working class housing renovated since it was built. Greenleaf and Cyphex are conventional public housing. They are Section 8 housing. And they have certainly not had a history of either stable community, tenant associations, upgrading and adequate care that characterize all of the renewal housing that preceded or up to World War II. So as the area became upgraded, these houses became increasingly desirable, and now they're bijou townhouses.
Hello, Dr. Lightman. Can you hear me?
There, I think I've unmuted.
You have. Thank you so much for that history lesson. That was outstanding. We're really thankful that you were able to put that together for us and really educate us a bit. Do you mind going back to, somebody asked a question about the sanitary housing company and how and what exactly the name, where that comes from. Can you remind us?
Well, it was formed in the 1890s. In fact, it was formed before there were incorporation laws in Washington, D.C. So it was incorporated first in Virginia. And it had among its early investors the newly formed Women's Anthropological Society, the first National Women's Anthropological Society, which is still in downtown Washington. And it had a number of private investors. It went through several evolutions, as companies do, eventually reincorporating in Washington, D.C. when Washington had incorporation laws. And it was disbanded in around 1940s. It built 1,500 apartment units in the Southwest, Telcor houses, what we know as the St. James Mutual houses, which were differently called than they were, but they were the first. They were built. They were really a smart company. Remember, the Washington Canal ran down Delaware Avenue. There's Canal Street there. That's where the canal was. And it was noxious. It wasn't covered till 1917. And the Washington sanitary people bought land along the west shore of the canal just as it was being covered, which they then built in the 1930s as Sternberg Gardens and is now the St. Mutual Housing. The Alley Dwelling Authority, just as interested in getting cheap land, bought on the east side, which is where the James Creek housing is.
Got it. Well, I mean, you, as I understand it, are literally writing the book on Southwest right now.
We're just finishing a book on the Southeast Waterfront called Reflections.
Got it. How did that come about, and how's that going?
It's going very well, actually. It's in design now. There's a new Cambria Hotel on Q Street, on the site of an older building that's been demolished, Q just off South Capitol. And the Cambria Hotel asked us if we would do a book for them because they wanted to put a book on the Southwest in each of their rooms.
Oh.
So we have written a book on the history of the Southeast Waterfront. It'll be a beautiful picture book, and it'll be one will be in each of their rooms and for sale at the hotel.
Wonderful, wonderful. That's exciting. And how long a process does that take you?
Oh, it'll be a year from beginning to end.
Okay, all right. I can't wait to read it. That was great. And are you a Southeast historian or DC historian alone, or how did you end up even being the?
By accident. Actually, my PhD and most of my scholarship is in ancient Greek and Roman history.
Oh.
And I became interested in this because I was an ANC commissioner.
Right.
And before I was an ANC commissioner, I had been approached about the historical context, buildings that should be listed and not listed in the area. So that's how I got involved. So it's through local activism that I became interested in Southwest Washington.
Well, we're very lucky to have you today and in the community. Thank you so much. There are some other questions about where this documentary that you've done will be available. We'll talk about what kind of availability we'll offer the public at some point and get back to these people, but there's definitely a lot of interest in it. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you.
I love the house tour.
Thank you so much. We love it too. And the village, the Waterfront Village. Thank you again. And back to you.
Okay, thank you, Andy. Well, as we've all seen, our home tour of 2020 was the result of many talented and generous people. A thank you to the homeowners who shared their homes and whom you met last week and this week. Bob Rose provided inestimable help in coordinating the participation of our boat homes. Tom Sherwood, Washington radio and TV personality and Southwest resident, provided his time and talent for our promotional video. And a special thank you to our longtime friend and village donor, Nelson Crouch. As you might imagine, the videography and editing took many hours, and our heartfelt appreciation goes to the incomparable duo of Bruce Moody and Vanya. Our technical director was Dr. Perry Klein. He's chair of the Southwest Neighborhood Technology Task Force, and he devoted many hours to the magic of technology. Our technical assistance team was headed by Dick Lang, but he had assistance with Matt Bechtel and Christine Wilson. The committee bringing this maiden voyage of a Zoom home tour was headed by Andy Piers. Andy deserves special thanks as he has chaired each of Waterfront Village's previous in-home tours. Village past President Barbara Ehrlich provided historical detail and editorial help. Elaine Graves, co-author of a booklet for River Park, also provided a wealth of information about Southwest history. Other committee members were Max Aguilar, Carol Cowgill, and Carol Quinn. Of course, our executive director keeps the wheels of the village turning every day, but he could not do this, and we cannot provide programs without continuing financial support. Please join me as I give a word of thanks to our corporate sponsors. Our silver sponsors, the National Capital Bank, KVS Title, and Piers Residential. Our additional sponsors, Georgetown Home Care, Southwest Business Improvement District, Smile Beautiful, Trust Ed, Champions for Seniors, the Southwest Chamber Players, Vellum Mortgage, 1331 Maryland, 555 East Street, J.R. Lynch Real Estate Partners, Right Size Law, and River Point. By the way, if you can, we're happy to accept donations of any size to continue the work of the village. Through the work of our volunteers, we're able to provide grocery and pharmacy shopping, delivery, transportation, meals as needed, and constant updates on precautions to take during this period of COVID precaution, in addition to our monthly newsletter. Just go to our website, www.waterfrontvillagehometour.org. We'll see you back here, same time, same place, next week, October 25th. Different homes and neighbors you may not have met yet. Now we bid adieu from Waterfront Village, building friendships and strong community in the Southwest and Navy Yard neighborhoods. Good day.
Thank you, Ann.
And that concludes our show.